Okay, welcome to another video. This video is about some insights I had when I was doing some research for a lady, and it compares the similarities between the fuels that feed the cancers in the body, physical cancers, and mind cancers in many ways, which we call psychological problems, psychological illnesses. Cancer is obviously a body illness. I want to start off with this first one, which is the fuel that causes, let me see if I can get this right here, that causes the ailments in the body. That should be pretty good, I think, right there. Okay, let's see if that would do the job. Here we go. So the first thing is that I was doing some research because a lady friend of ours, she had cancer for a while. She's been having it for some time, and she's doing the general stuff that they also advise, of course, in the more allopathic medical world, the establishment, and doing, for example, the chemo and stuff like that. It wasn't really working too well for her, and she asked me, because I do a lot of research over the years, and she said, could you take a look at what's going on? I was kind of out of touch with what's the newest things, but one of the things I ran into was this research, and I'm by no means giving any advice here. It's not medical advice. This is just for me to give an analysis where I see a similarity between what the research Dr. Tom Seyfried has found, who's a professor in Boston College, I think, and he is finding a lot of interesting stuff about the fuels that fuel cancer cells and what you can do about it. So no medical advice here, just a comparison that I'd like to make because of my insights in the similarities between the body and the mind. Now, basically, Tom Seyfried was explaining, from what I can recite, is that there's two fuels that cancers feed off. It's glucose and glutamine. Now, the glucose we know, it's basically the sugars and the carbohydrates that we consume. And that also makes it very easy to get rid of because you can change your diet. We'll go into that in a minute. But basically, glucose, the cancers, if you get cancer in the body, the cancer will feed off of glucose, both in an aerobic or hypoxic or anaerobic system. So in an oxygen-rich environment, also an oxygen-poor environment. Same for glutamine. It can feed off of in a hypoxic and in a apoxic or in a high oxygen environment and a low oxygen environment. But that's on the side. Glucose basically does a few things. One thing is that the body, when it consumes glucose, when you eat foods that are carbohydrate rich and sugar rich, your body will create a hyper. This is where the body goes up, your blood sugar goes up, and then insulin tries to bring it back down. Usually, because insulin is overproduced a little bit, it goes lower than your baseline, and you end up in what they call a hypo. So you end up going, by eating, up into a hyper, then your insulin tries to bring it back down, and you go into hypo. And most people, because of the, let's say, the Western diet, this modern diet, which is way too rich in sugars and carbohydrates, we end up going up and down and up and down and up and down. That's also caused the blood sugars constantly spiking, so you go into what they call insulin resistance after a while. The body just doesn't like going up and down all the time. You get insulin resistant because it's doing it all the time, so you really get resistant to the insulin, so it doesn't work as well anymore, eventually even leading to diabetes. But the main important thing here is that glucose feeds cancer cells. And the way they found that is that when they feed cancer cells glucose and glutamine, that's the only two fuels they found they grow on. They don't grow on anything else but glucose and glutamine. The way they find that is that in the waste products of glucose and glutamine from the cancer cells, you can find what is exactly the waste product that is clearly from glucose and clearly from glutamine and nothing else. So they've tried to feed cancer cells all kinds of things, including ketones, which we'll go into later, but they haven't found that they can grow on anything else but glucose and glutamine. Very interesting research. Look it up for yourself. I'm not the expert on that subject. I'm just using it for the comparison here. And so what happens is, if you want to get rid of the glucose, you can fully, or not fully, but highly get rid of it. There's always going to be some glucose in some places, in some foods. But you can change your diet from what we call the high sugar or carbohydrate glucose diet, let's say, which is the Western diet, to a ketogenic diet. And a ketogenic diet, for those of you who don't know, is where the body goes into a different mode of fuel. It doesn't use glucose anymore for its main fuel, but it will switch to ketones. And ketones are made from fats. So when you go into this ketogenic diet, you're eating more proteins and fats, and the fats are turned into ketones, and the ketones are used for the fuel. And ketones do not take your body in ups and downs. It's a very stable, homeostatic kind of diet. It just keeps you right there without the brain fog, without all the downs of the hypers and the hypos. And so the ketogenic diet anyway is a more natural diet to follow for a more healthy system. But on top of that, when you've reduced the glucose to such levels that it's so low that the cancer cells can actually not feed anymore on the glucose. So that's how he explains that glucose, you can get rid of it. It's fully in your own grasp. You change your diet, and you'll go into a ketogenic state, and the ketogenic state will bring you into that base mode, and it won't feed cancers. Then you have the glutamine. Now, glutamine is an essential part of the body. It's made by the body, and we can't do without it. There's no way that you can just cut off glutamine. Even with your diet, it's impossible to cut off glutamine, because glutamine is made by the body and is essential for a lot of things, but also intestinal health and your nervous system are two big ones that it's very important for. Without glutamine, you'd be killing yourself anyway, so you might as well let the cancer do it, but don't cut yourself off from glutamine totally. But glutamine you cannot change with your diet. So the only way to cut down the glutamine, he says, is to basically use repurposed medicines or pharmaceuticals, and these are known to have very little side effects, and they actually shut down, or I think it's kind of like a glutamine blocker in a way. It stops your body from producing glutamine, and so what they do then is they use this pulse therapy, which means they use the repurposed pharmaceutical to cut off the glutamine production for a few days, and then you turn it on again by not taking medicine so that your body can make it again, because it's essential for your body, so you cannot go without it. So they do maybe 3 days medicine, 4 days not, or some people go as much as 6 days and only take 1 day off, depending on what you can handle, what your body can handle. But when you turn the glucose off and the glutamine, the cancers have no fuels left, and they seem to have very good success with this. Now again, do not take it as medical advice, but it's something to take in account. What I found is when I did the research, because of my way of thinking about these things, I found an uncanny similarity to the mind. And when you look at the two systems together, but I'll just put these two together first, because that's probably the best way to start off here, to put them next to each other. I found this uncanny similarity between the two. So with the body, you have the glucose and the glutamine that feed the cells of the cancer. And these lead to, let's say, malaise, right? Sicknesses, illnesses, right? Bodily illnesses. But when it comes to psychological illnesses, which can be from overthinking to depression, from people who just can't stop their thoughts and are kind of suffering from their own thoughts and emotions, being overactive, you would call that a psychological or psychic illness, or psychological illness, mind illnesses, let's say. And these can go all the way to depression and suicide, right? So to stop the thoughts is like stopping the glucose spikes, because thoughts are going up and down. You have positive and negative thoughts all the time. And I'll just put this one up for now. Let me just put this one up for here. Let's see, that will probably work. And with thoughts, it's the same system as we have with the glucose. Thoughts are like glucose because they're up and down. You have thoughts all day, like people eating foods all day, just going to the fridge, grabbing another thing because the hyper has come down by the insulin, and then you're in a hypo, and then you feed it a little bit again. People have been taught in our society not only to eat unhealthily like the glucose system, they've also been taught to think all the time, as though the mind's faculty is the alpha and the omega, the only thing that matters. The voice is in the head, which is just, they think their own voice. A lot of people think, oh, it's my own voice, you know? But thoughts are active from the moment people wake up. And in that sense, they're spiking it. They're going from hypers to hypos. If you're thinking all the time, it's inevitable for most people, unless you have real self-control, to only have positive thoughts. You'd have to get ups and downs. And all the time, people thinking about things and worrying about the children, about the money, about the work, all these kinds of issues. And so what happens is that thoughts are leading people into the similar system as the glucose does. Emotions are necessary as well, as thoughts are, if they're balanced, if they're used properly, if they're used as a tool. Just like glucose, you can eat it if you have a healthy body, but not too much. You can have thoughts, but not too many. Same with emotions. You can have your emotions because emotions are let's say, our compass, our soul compass, our purpose compass. They give us a bearing on what is right and wrong for our particular makeup. We come here with a specific purpose, with specific likings, specific things that really we gravitate to, and other things that we're not gravitating to. That's what makes all the differences in people. And the emotions are your emotional compass. You get a bearing on what you like and what you don't like, what you prefer to other things, right? And so emotions are necessary, but they get out of control, just like the thoughts. Too many or too intense positive and negative emotions, they will lead to these psychic illnesses, malaise of the mind, worry, anxiety, depression. They all come from these two working in synchronicity. You could say that the emotions are the powerhouse of the thoughts. They actually fuel it, like the battery bank of the thoughts. But emotions are necessary. But too much, like glutamine, will feed the cancer. So if you have the glutamine all the time and it's readily available, like emotions being used all the time on overactive, they will feed the mind cancer, so as to speak. And so what we do with this is almost similar to the food. With the thoughts, like with the glucose, you can actually reduce it and run on a different kind of fuel. Because thoughts are not necessary all the time, as glucose is not necessary all the time. So I'll just put these two back on here so they have these comparison here. But if you look at this system, glucose is not needed all the time. If you have a healthy body, you don't have cancer, you can handle a lot more glucose until you do get cancer, and then it will feed the cancer and will grow really fast. Same for the glutamine. You can have thoughts, right? But if you have too many, it will be too much, and you will feed the mind cancers, which would be called depression and all these kinds of illnesses, mental illnesses. Same for the emotions, like the glutamine. The emotions would also be too much if it's all readily available for the system to consume. So for those who are trying to get back to their natural state of being, which would be in a way the ketogenic body, or the ketogenic mind, that you could call it, you'd have to bring the thoughts down into a more quiet state. And when you bring thoughts back, the way to do that, one of the most efficient ways, is to bring your attention back to the now, to this present moment, where you just hear what you hear, you feel what you feel, you're in this quiet, silent place, and you don't have to have these thoughts all the time. You don't have to run to the fridge all the time and cause a spike again. But now in this society with all the social media, we just seem to be so short-spanned of our attention, and we need some impulse. People just ran back. You can see it everywhere I go, everybody's on their phone. It's incredible. Not even just the young people, but all the old people as well. Sometimes even more the older generation can't control them. So you see a bunch of people. Sometimes I see them at the beach or in this beautiful place at a waterfall, and they're just standing there, they're sitting on their phone, watching their own things as they took pictures or videos. There were way too many people in their thoughts, into their emotions. Like there was way too many people in the fridge feeding all the time. So the thoughts have to be reduced, and they're reduced by what's called meditation. And meditation is really nothing more than bringing the attention from this overextended mind. I have other videos where you see the mind as the overextended system, where it's too much in the past, too much in the future, and it just being brought back through meditation into this state of now, just this moment right here, where the universe actually is, where everything actually takes place, here, now. So you focus on your breathing, you reduce the thoughts by not putting your attention on them, and allowing yourself to sink back into what is the moment, this present moment, where everything is, the universal intelligence, which is now, and there's nothing but now. This is eternity, this is now. So when you reduce the thoughts through meditation, the thoughts start calming down. And then the emotions, which generally are in the solar plexus system, in the chest, you could say the chest, the solar plexus, and the belly. It's where emotions reside. When you reduce the emotions, it's like reducing the glutamine. With the pulse therapy, you'd say, okay, I can have the emotions to take a bearing on what is good and what is wrong for me, what is right and what's wrong for me. You use the emotions as your radar, as your compass, your emotional compass, to guide you through life to what your soul actually feels right with and not right with. So when you reduce the emotions, the way to do it is to get the attention off of the emotional frequency of this area. This is where emotions reside. And instead, you focus on the subtle, more subtle well-being in the body. Well-being is what I call sensation. Emotions are much more grosser. They're more turbulent, they're more active, they're more like a can of worms moving around, and emotions are much grosser. They're much grosser than the sensations, which are much subtler. You can feel the sensation in your hands if you close your eyes. You can feel sensation in the fingertips. You can feel it in your lips. Lips are very sensitive. You can feel it in your cheeks, maybe even your scalp. I can feel it everywhere, and the more you practice, you can feel sensation filling the body, but you keep your attention off of the general area in the solar plexus, because usually that will be grosser and calling more attention, and so that will get you more into that. So to do that, you're basically going to go into what I've been talking to a lot of videos, and these are the insights I seem to be getting all the time through my own process, is that when you reduce the thoughts by being in the now, the eternity, the eternal moment, being with what is, which is actually, if you wish, for those who are not bothered with the word God, like you're actually bringing yourself to God. Like Meister Eckhart as well, but Eckhart Tolle has a book called The Power of Now. But now really is the universe, or God. So the power of now really is the power of God. So you bring yourself to everything that is now. The whole universe is right now. And then the emotions, you don't focus on the emotions, you focus on the sensation. So you give yourself, your attention, another anchor. And you anchor yourself in well-being. And well-being, which is also what you do in meditation, focusing on the well-being in the body, brings your mind into a homeostatic field. So that what we'd call homeostasis in the mind, or the ketogenic mind, you can even call it. This would be the ketogenic body over there, and then you have the ketogenic mind. So, just a little cap. I've seen, at least in my realization of this when I was doing the research, I found a very canny similarity, and they say, as above, so below. So mind is above, and some of the other models you see how I put the mind above it, then spirit even above that. As above, so below. So if the model of the mind is similar to the body, because as above, so below, you'll see that we can actually make a pretty good comparison. And in our society right now, due to a lot of circumstances, we are being fed a wrong diet for the body, but we're also being fed a wrong diet for the mind. We're almost on a glucose type of mind fuels, which are overactive. We're not being taught, hey, you should take it easy on the glucose. And you could pulse the glutamine, especially if you have already an aberrant or an overactive mind. So you don't have to necessarily go immediately to these kind of drugs like the Ritalin and the antidepressants and all these kinds of drugs, when you could first, get the thoughts lower and get the emotions lower. You don't immediately have to, in this case, the advice would be don't consume too many sugars. And if you have cancers, if you're sick and the body's already at that point where you're sick with cancer or sick with a mental illness, then we could reduce the thoughts. This is what we should be taught in school from early days, to be back in the moment. Don't give the thoughts the absolute power. They're not the alpha and omega. The mind function is a function. It's an artificial type of intelligence, and it should be used with thoughts and emotions responsibly. Food, your body needs to eat, you need to consume foods, but you don't need to have an overconsumption of glucose and too much glutamine. We can reduce the glutamine. In this case, it would be a different model, but the point would be, we are in many ways sick of the mind because the mind is being overly used. It's being overemphasized by our society. Our society puts too much emphasis as though this is the God, this system, this AI system, this mental system. I call it the EI, right? The ego intelligence. But the EI system, or the AI system, the mind, is a tool. And it should not be on all the time. And therefore, you could compare this in many ways to what you'd say with intermittent fasting, or fasting in general. See, when people fast, the main reason why it works so well is because they're going to get out of the glucose system. You're going to burn all the glucose, and after many, many hours, like 15, 18 hours, depending on the bodies, different people react differently, you'll be without glucose, and you'll go into a ketogenic state. Your body will start producing ketones because it has no glucose left. And that's what makes the body what's made fasting so good for people. That's why fasting has been really a big thing in these last few years. Everybody's speaking about it a lot online. You can do your own research on that. But we also need to fast from our mind. So in many senses, we're not fasting from this mental activity. This is the eating activity. The body never gets to go back to a homeostatic state without food. And that's where the body starts cleaning up. When you're without the glucose, in a fasted state, the body will start actually saying, okay, well, now that I'm not metabolizing, now that I don't have to focus on digestion and everything like that, I can actually focus on something else. And that's exactly what the body does. It starts cleaning up. Right? It goes into these different states where it says, oh, now that I have the energy that I usually use for metabolization and digestion, I will now turn that into cleaning and repurposing. And it will start rearranging and cleaning up dead cells and cleaning up damaged cells, and it will start recycling it for healthy systems. And when you're in this fasting mode from the mind, which means not too many thoughts and emotions, and you go to this well-being of just being in the now without always actively being busy with these thoughts and emotions and social media and future and past and all the thoughts that we have, now the mind can actually start repurposing the energy and start focusing on organizing again. And this is where the stillness of being, the presence of just now, this well-being of just being back into where you just simply are here and now, starts reorganizing your life. And suddenly insights and realizations will start to come, because all these dead loops of thought, these dead emotional cycles that you've been repeating over and over and over, right? Because that's what thoughts usually are. They're just repeating over and over to ad nauseum, at the point where people become depressed and suicidal because they just can't get out of these loops of thoughts and emotions, which are driving to even suicide in many cases, where they try to eventually kill the body because they're really trying to get rid of this overactive mind, which is an AI system which has gone totally rogue. This is a body gone rogue with cancer. If you have cancer, this will feed on that. And this is a psychic cancer in many ways, when the AI system of the mind is overactive and can't stop. It drives people to madness. And so that's why I would like to explain this model. And it's very, very similar to fasting. Basically, in this model, you're fasting from glucose, from all these carbohydrates and sugars. And in this model, you're also giving your mind a rest, so that it can actually sink back into its homeostatic state, which we could say is the ketogenic mind. And your body goes from, let's say in this case, we actually even call, right? We say cancer, right? We say that, they do chemo, and this is keto. I mean, better to do keto than to do chemo, I think, but that's up to you. But in the mind, it's the same thing. We want to get back to this system where you're in the ketogenic mind, right? Otherwise, you're going to the chemo mind, because an overactive artificial intelligent mind running from morning to night into madness will lead you to illnesses. And so that's the model, and I hope it helps. Similarities here between these two. I hope it gives some kind of clarity. And really, stillness is still the way. And we need to actually get back to a state of mind where we're calm, where we're rested, where we're in the well-being, where thoughts are used as a tool only, emotions are used as a tool only when they are needed, but they're not needed all the time. You run this system, you overrun this system, you overrun this system, and they fuel each other because the emotions will fuel the thoughts, and then you can't stop. And especially in bad times. Don't do this in good times, you won't be able to do it in bad times. When something goes wrong, when shit hits the fan, when you lose somebody, or when something happens with your business and your banking and your money and your this and your health, this is the moment where these will not stop. These will not stop. And this is the torture, what the Buddha would call suffering. Suffering comes from being not in a ketogenic mindset, not in a ketogenic homeostatic mindset. So bring it back, be in the moment, meditate, focus on the well-being, which is the ketones of the psyche, the ketones of the mind, so that the system is stable, so that your body has the fuel things. You can do that with your food. And then the mind is also in a ketogenic, homeostatic, peaceful way. And when it then needs the mind to work something out, it does. When it needs the emotions, it does. But but it shouldn't be on all the time, and it shouldn't be on overdrive. And it's certainly what our society has been pushing with all the movies and all the stuff that's been putting in, and now even the speeding up of the artificial AI. This is the natural AI that we've been born with, this mind. But now they're trying to extend into artificial intelligence and supercomputers to be even faster, so that in the end we can be plugged into it. If it's up to some people, they'll plug you into it, and you'll have thoughts that race 1,000 times faster than your own thoughts are running right now. So I don't think the artificial intelligence system that they're talking about is where we need to go. We need to actually use the already existing intelligence, a quantum intelligence, which is the spirit, which comes above this. I'll make another video about that, so that we have body, mind, and spirit, and not a faster and faster and faster mind, so more and more thoughts, and then get more and more emotional scrambled, like we now are with these short videos everywhere on social media, and people are just being shattered, you know? So I hope that helps, and yeah, hope to see you in another video.